Musical prodigies often shock and stun the masses with their ability to play musical instruments like the violin and the piano with perfect technique from an early age. But among all these prodigies, one in particular stands out, not only for her precocious mastery of the violin and the piano, but also for her gift of composing melodically and harmonically rich music. Today, I would like to introduce you to one of my new favorite contemporary composers, Alma Deutscher, and we'll take a brief survey of her accomplishments, her music, and her somewhat divisive philosophy. Alma Elisabeth Deutscher has probably accomplished more at the age of 20 than most people would hope to do by 40. Born in the UK in 2005, she quickly displayed a strong affinity for music and began to play the piano at the ripe old age of 2, and started violin lessons the next year. But from the beginning, a love for composing her own music also began welling up in the soul of the young Alma. I'll let her explain in her own words how this came about.
When I was very, very young, then my parents prepared a CD for me with beautiful lullabies. And almost every night, I would listen to these lullabies when I was falling asleep. And there was one lullaby that I really loved more than all the others. It's by Richard Strauss. And I loved it so much that one day when I was 4, I went to my parents and asked them, "How can music be so beautiful?" Soon after that, I started to invent my own melodies. And in all the music that I have composed since, I have always tried to make it sound as beautiful as I can.
And so, Deutscher, the young prodigy, began writing music, and lots of it. Her compositions include, among others, an opera, Cinderella, which she herself conducted 2 years ago.
She gave me all the wrong chords! You must sack her immediately.
A violin concerto, and a piano concerto. But by far, the most significant thing about this rising star is her musical philosophy and the way she expresses this through her compositions. Let's take a brief look at this philosophy, using her own compositions and her explanations of her ideas as a guide. Alma Deutscher is actually an extremely conservative composer whose music mostly derives from that of 18th and 19th century Europe. If she's controversial at all, it's mainly because she's adamant about one thing: music ought to be beautiful. And ugly modern classical music, well, she'll have none of it.
Some people have told me that I compose in the musical language of the past, and that this is not allowed in the 21st century. In the past, it was possible to compose beautiful melodies and beautiful music. But today, they say, I'm not allowed to compose like this anymore, because I need to discover the complexity of the modern world, and that the point of music is to show the complexity of the world. Well, let me tell you a huge secret. I already know that the world is complex and can be very ugly, but I think that these people have just got a little bit confused. If the world is so ugly, then what's the point of making it even uglier with ugly music?
If I love this young composer so much, it's because I relate to her story very well. I was trained by a very conservative classical teacher for a couple of years, and then she recommended that I go on and study with someone else. So I went to a second teacher and I did some lessons with him. And he was very helpful, but he did encourage me to go listen to the music of Bela Bartok in order to branch out and explore. This is what some of his music sounds like. Yeah, I listened to one of these quartets by Bartok for about 2 minutes and then shut it off and never went back again. I'm sorry, but Bela Bartok's string quartets are just hideous. Alma Deutscher may be very vocal about her distaste towards modern classical music, but she has a way of answering her detractors that is both clever and charming. And there are 2 pieces of music that she wrote that are a particularly brilliant example of this. Her musical comedy, The Emperor's New Waltz, and her concert piece, The Waltz of the Sirens. The Emperor's New Waltz is a comic opera, and Alma Deutscher's third contribution to the genre. It's unique in that it combines elements of pop, rock, jazz, and classical music together in an attempt to show that these forms of music all have one thing in common, one basic ingredient in common: good melody.
Ich wollte in dieser Oper zeigen, dass die klassische Musik und Popmusik nicht so weit entfernt ist voneinander, als die meisten Leute denken. Weil die gute klassische Musik mit den schönsten Melodien und die gute Popmusik mit den schönsten Melodien, da ist nicht so viel Unterschied.
But the opera is also, in part, a gentle dig at Deutscher's critics, who would tell her that her music ought to be more ugly in order to be considered relevant in today's day and age. One of the characters featured in the opera is a music professor who is trying to convince the others that his noisy, ugly music should be considered artistically refined. Part of the genius of Alma Deutscher is that when she answers her critics, she always does so with her tongue in her cheek and a smile on her face, and I don't know who'd be able to resist that kind of charm. Another piece by Alma Deutscher, which is clearly an answer to the critics of her style, is the Waltz of the Sirens. It is a waltz worthy of the likes of Johann Strauss and draws heavily on the Viennese style. Deutscher herself gave an explanation of the significance of this piece at one of her concerts.
So now I'll tell you a little bit about the waltz that's coming now, because it starts in quite a strange way, and I don't want you to get a shock. When I moved to Vienna, one of the first things that struck me was the sound of the police sirens there. They sound very different from the wailing sirens like here in America. They go, la ra, la ra, la ra, la ra. Or if you want a closer imitation, and when I heard this Viennese siren, I tried in my mind to continue it as a melody. And since Vienna is the city of waltzes, I thought I should turn it into a waltz melody. Now, I've always wanted to write beautiful music, music that comes out of the heart and speaks directly to the heart. But some people have told me that nowadays melodies and beautiful harmonies are no longer acceptable in serious classical music, because in the 21st century, music must reflect the ugliness of the modern world. Well, in this waltz, instead of trying to make my music artificially ugly in order to reflect the modern world, I went in exactly the opposite direction. I took some ugly sounds from the modern world, and I tried to turn them into something more beautiful through music.
The piece starts off with the orchestra imitating the sounds of a noisy street. You hear an Austrian police siren, an American police siren, cars driving by, and horns honking. In the composer's own words, a complete cacophony. But then, something amazing happens. Slowly but surely, the street sounds are transformed into not just music, but into a series of 4 gorgeous Viennese waltzes that incorporate elements of the noisy street sounds from the beginning. The final waltz is based on the sound of the Austrian police siren, which jumps up and down a fourth. And I'd say that the way Alma handles this siren noise during this particular waltz is rather tongue-in-cheek. Once again, this is a brilliant response to Alma Deutscher's critics, and as always, sweet and charming. Who could resist this kind of charm? Who could respond to this sort of thing in a mean way? Alma Deutscher is quickly becoming one of my own favorites, and I hope that you will look up her music too, and listen to it when you have time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.